Top, 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 top. Will you say something?
Potatoes! Potatoes. Boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
The battle of wizards and warriors continues with iron swords. The evil wizard Malkil will take the shape of the earth, wind, water, and fire. Farewell! The fate of the world is in your hands!
You're listening to the Piercing Wizard podcast, and I'm your host, Ryan Willett. I'm a professional body piercer with 20 years experience. I travel around the world teaching technique and safety classes, and I'm a member of the Association of Professional Piercers. Listen in as I talk to my friends and colleagues about our industry so we can all stay sharp. Welcome back to another episode of the Piercing Wizard podcast. I am Ryan, and this is
Lola.
We are in Glasgow, Scotland. This is about the middle of May 2024, and we're going to go over some questions. We've done a handful of Ask Us Anything episodes in the past, and that's what we're going to go for. So we had some questions submitted through an online form. We're going to pick a few of them and just kind of chat it out. So, you feeling ready?
Ready to go.
Okay. Before we get into it, I just want to remind everybody that we're both going to be at the APP conference in Las Vegas next month. I'll be teaching the safe practices in the piercing room workshop with Lola, as well as a panel at the end of the week about different things about running a studio. What are some of the subjects you're doing?
Well, I'm co-instructing with you with safe practices, and I'm taking part in a panel on setting healthy boundaries with clients. I'm teaching my how to do a bridge piercing class for the first time in America, which is very exciting. And I think I'm also assisting with an anodizing workshop, which I'm not 100% sure. I think might be one of the alternative to the bar.
I think it is.
Events. So
yeah,
pretty full schedules.
That should be cool. We are also going to be on the vendor floor. We'll have a Piercing Wizard booth. So come and check it out. Stop by and say hi. And just as a reminder, if you're already a subscriber on patreon.com/RyanPBA, even if you sign up that week at conference, I'm going to have a shirt for you. So we've done some like kind of Patreon thank you shirts the last few years at conference, and this year will be no exception. So we'll have a brand new design that Lola came up with. I really like it a lot. I'll have a handful of other t-shirt designs this year too, and we'll have a whole bunch of pins and stickers and some fun stuff. So stop by our booth in the expo and say hi to us. And let's go ahead and get into it.
Mm-hmm.
So first question is, how do you grow your social media presence, your following, your algorithm, portfolios, etc.? And I'm going to take this one first because I was actually looking at your physical portfolio. You showed me that you've had for the last, I don't know, how old would you say that portfolio was?
That one was 10 years old.
Okay, so
it
you
was
had
from 2014.
It was really cool, like cool stuff in it, really good stuff, especially for that long ago. I have a couple of physical portfolios that I've been hanging on to in the studio. And I think that like the online version of a portfolio has changed so much now, where you're trying to get people in the door, whereas like those physical portfolios that you would have in your lobby was showing what you could do, and it was a really different thing that you were trying to achieve with both of them. When you have an online portfolio on Instagram, I feel like a lot of times you're trying to get a new customer to come to your studio, so you're kind of trying to market based on like that day, that week, that year's trends. A lot of like small fashionable stuff in the ear, different things like that, trying to bring people in. And when I hear the word portfolio, it's the body of work that you're capable of doing. So you'd have lots of different categories, lots of different examples to show this is what I can do as a piercer. So modern Instagram, modern social media, modern whatever is just so different these days. So what are some of your strategies? Like, what do you use your social media presence for?
Well, to me, my portfolio is the collection of more permanent images on my website, that's updated not very often, a few times a year. And they're just images that, like you say, are examples of the work that I can do with an eclectic mix of jewellery. And some of them are just images that I really love. When you take a photo and just everything in the photo just really looks fantastic. And you're like, this is what I would like from a portfolio image. Whereas my Instagram or my Facebook work page social media feed is really more just like this constant stream of work, just to show that, yes, I'm open, I'm working, I'm here. It's not necessarily what I would consider my portfolio, just my work feed. And maybe I'm unique in making those differentiations. I don't know if other piercers have those same mental differentiations. For some piercers, their social media is a portfolio and they're very selective with what images they'll upload. And for others, it's also just like this constant stream of posting and just being active. So sometimes a little bit less maybe care is taken with each image. You just would like to post something from that day. So it kind of depends on what it is that you want from it. Is it a portfolio social media page, or is it a social media page to show the average daily workings in the studio, and then your permanent portfolio is something else? So I would say it depends which of those two things you're thinking that your page is going to be. I think that it's a shame more people don't have websites. I think that we're from the website generation, or at least I'm from the website generation, and I know a lot fewer piercers now take the time to set up a website, this little island on the internet where you can kind of do whatever you want and fill the space however you want, and it is more reliant on social media now. I would like to see more piercers making websites, but maybe that's just me.
Something that I've noticed is a lot of piercers have very few things to show that they're an active professional piercer. They don't have much of a social media presence. They don't have website presence on their studio's website. They don't have their own websites. They don't really have a lot of footprint of I'm a piercer, and it's very strange to me, because when I was piercing and coming up, I wanted to, in a way, show off what I could do, because I was proud of my achievements, my goals, what I was doing. And I don't know if that means that piercing is a little bit more disposable these days, or if it's a higher traffic business and you're kind of on to the next one, focusing on the next thing. But not a lot of piercers are documenting what they're doing. Even if you feel like you're earlier on in your career, I still think you should be documenting it and trying to make the biggest footprint you can. And that kind of leads into the other parts of this question is how do you grow your social media presence? And I think it has to be more than just take a picture and post a picture every now and then. The people that I've seen use social media in really successful ways, they're all doing it on kind of a schedule, and it's all about consistency. You want to think about the algorithm and when people are going to be most active, and the people that you want to follow you or engage with your work, when are they most active? So some of the things that I'll do is try to post at a consistent peak time every day. For me, that'll be somewhere between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because that's when a lot of the people that are engaging with my work are kind of in a lull, and they're using their phone that afternoon or whatever. So consistency is part of it. You don't want to just post one picture and then nothing else for a month and a half. You want to post something every day, or at least a few times a week. You can try to use your story, things like that, to engage with the people that are more actively following you. But I think a lot of it is you have to be consistent. If you want people to follow you and engage with you and grow your presence, you have to give them something to look at on a consistent level.
So in terms of, like, when you say consistency, think about how you, the listener, use social media. What do you use it for? A lot of people now use it for comfort because of the consistency, because of the regularity. Most people have a handful of celebrities or influencers or just random people that they follow that they often check in with because they know they'll have posted something. And it's almost like getting that little, like how people used to watch soap operas more. That's just sometimes nice to, it's serialized, to look in on something every day and have it be there. There are some really well managed social media pages, Holier Than Thou in Manchester. They have done an amazing job of organically interacting with their community, and their social media is always flourishing. And I think that that's something that they've put a lot of time into growing, a lot more than I've put into mine. And you can really see how that's developed when you look at theirs. So I would say maybe look into what some other people are doing, but and obviously think about what you want from social media when you use it as a user to try and shape your decision making. But honestly, more than anything for me, I think it's important to remember that numbers aren't everything and followers aren't everything. You can have a person with 60,000 followers, 100,000 followers. They can still be dead at work because those followers aren't necessarily coming into their business and spending money and buying things and having services done. And then you can have a page where there's maybe 3,000 followers, but they're always very busy in the studio. So doing really well numbers wise online doesn't always translate to sales. I think in most situations it doesn't translate to sales.
I think that one of the things that seems less successful to me are the piercers that are engaging with the worldwide public, answering questions and things like that, because they're not necessarily your clients. They might be on the other side of the planet. So I like to engage in a slightly more local way, like look at this piercing, come in, look at these new pieces of jewelry that we got, things like that. I'll put out like lots of information content, but I'm not necessarily putting it out in the same forum that I'm trying to put out my come get pierced by me content.
And that's something that I think you've explained it probably better than I did, that Hollywood now do, is they engage with their community. They're constantly engaging with the Manchester community. Becky Crossan on the UKPP board, she was doing some teaching a while ago about local marketing, grassroots marketing, engaging with your community and the different ways that you can do that. I don't know if it's a class that she still does, but that would definitely be something worth checking out if she does.
You could also go back on the podcast too, and Becky actually came on the podcast and talked about that very subject.
Right. So I think that the main thing when it comes to growing your social media isn't the size you grow it to, it's where you're growing it. Are you growing it amongst your local audience, the people that live in the towns and cities surrounding your place of work? Or are you interacting with thousands of people a day, but there are people who are never going to walk through your door? So I think spending your time in the right places, even if it doesn't result in as much of a following, is probably more valuable from a business perspective.
So you're saying that it's not so much the size, but how you use it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so our next question is guest work process and how to go about it. I think we should try to approach this from two different perspectives, one as a studio owner and one as a piercer. You've done more guest work than I have. You've worked in more studios that you don't own than I have. I've done very little guest work, really just at Pinpoint, essentially. And that was kind of being invited to go guest work there and basically cover while their staff had some other obligations going on. So I haven't done a lot of guest work. I brought in a few guest piercers, Zach Boyer most recently, which wasn't all that recent. And that was essentially to cover so I could take Evan with me to BMXNet. So I think that this question is more for the person who wants to be that aspiring traveling piercer, that like wanderlust kind of piercer, wants to try out different things in other studios, maybe get a wider perspective, and it's not so much limited to just coverage. So why don't you talk about maybe your guest experiences? Like, how did those come about? Was it an invitation thing, or did you try to seek out studios to do guest work in?
The first studio that I ever did a guest spot at was Barbarella in Gothenburg in Sweden. I was invited there by a piercer who was working there at the time, who'd been working in Edinburgh. So I met him here in Scotland, and then only a couple of times chatted, interacted, and then he invited me to cover for him while he travelled somewhere else. And at this point, I think I'd been piercing for 6 years, so not as long as some people that have done guest spots at that point. It felt at the time like the thought at that point I didn't travel as much, so the thought of traveling to Sweden and doing a guest spot, it was like I couldn't possibly, there's no way I could do that. I had major imposter syndrome. I was like, everyone's gonna know that I'm a loser that can't pierce, all kinds of stuff that wasn't true. And the other people that I worked with kind of talked me into going, and they were like, we'll figure it out. You can take the time off. You have to go. And they were the ones that were like, this is such a big deal. You can't miss up this opportunity. So I went there. That's where I met Wilhelm. He was the other piercer at Barbarella. And that was the first place that I pierced with blade needles, as they're known in the UK and Europe. No, they're just often called needles in the US. But that was the first place that I had attempted that.
Yeah.
And it was a very positive experience. And I think that if I would say anything to give any kind of advice about guest spotting, it's be open. Just be a sponge. Be as open as you can to experiencing new things, especially if you're traveling to another country.
It's tough for me to really... I think what this person wants is kind of... number one, encouragement. I would say definitely try to get out there. But the other side of me wants to be really brutally honest, because as a studio owner, if someone contacted me, and I have been contacted in the past, and people have been like, hey, I'm around and I'm available, or I'm going to be in your area these dates and I'm going to be available for coverage. And it's like, I don't know you. Sometimes I do know somebody and it's like, well, we don't really need coverage, but you can come in and shadow, you can come in and hang out or something. But to be like brutally honest, like, I don't really have a lot of wiggle room for someone who's still on a journey. Like, I can't have a guest artist come in who needs to be trained how to pierce, like in a certain way, use certain stuff. So I think that there are some studios that can be a little bit more forgiving for that sort of thing, maybe be a little bit more interested in having a training component or having more of a growth component. But my studio, a little bit smaller, a little bit slower traffic, and if someone's going to come in for guest work in my studio, they need to be able to really bring their A game. That's why having somebody like Zach Boyer in fits so well for me. I didn't have to be nervous trying to go to bed at the end of the night because I knew Zach had it under control. He's worked in so many amazing studios. He's very versatile. Tools, no tools, this jewelry, that jewelry, whatever, piercings. Like, he didn't have a whole list of like, well, I don't want to do these, I don't want to do these, I can't do these. It was just like, yep, just show me where this is, show me where that is, and then let me at it, which was great. But, how do you feel about something like that? Like the person who wants to guest pierce to learn in today's modern piercing industry.
Right, because those are very different things. There's guest piercing to learn new techniques, and then there's guest piercing because I'm a workhorse, I'm going to be visiting this city, like, tag me in, let me work for a week, I'm going to do an amazing job. Those are very different things, and I think you need to determine for yourself whether you're offering the space or requesting the space, what it is that you're looking for, because I think that leads to some confusion and some conflict as well, where people aren't being completely honest with themselves or others about what they're looking for. Are you looking for someone who you can work with to assist you in the studio that's going to learn some things, or are you looking for someone that you can really rely on that's going to take the brunt of the workload for the days that you're needing them to work cover? So I think that that process and how to go about it, I would say first of all, iron out exactly what it is that you're wanting to achieve or what you're offering. If you're the person who's applying for work and who's looking to achieve guest spots, you have to treat it like any other job. Why should they give you a guest spot specifically? Do you have references? What are some of the things that you're able to perform? Do you have a no list, and how extensive is that? Like all that information, it's important to be forthcoming with. And then obviously there's the other side as being the person who's offering a guest spot or seeking guest work, and being equally forthcoming with what's available, what the pay structure is like, what the accommodation is like. Is the travel being compensated, or are you having to pay for it yourself? Really being upfront with all of that information, because a lot of guest spots can often be financially neutral. And it really just depends on what it is that you need the cover for and what the ultimate goal is. So for a lot of guest spots, they aren't big kind of money-making ventures in most cases, I would say. So I think just being forthcoming with what it is that you want, what it is you're looking for, and just being as honest and transparent as you can is the best way to go about it.
Yeah, and maybe once you've made that determination of what you want out of it, what you're offering for it, have realistic goals and realistic expectations for some of the answers you might get. Put yourself out there, but also put yourself out there in a way where you want to create an answer. Like if the answer is not yes, you don't really want the answer to just be like, no, I'm not interested. Maybe have it be more like, well, that's not really what we're looking for, but this is what we're looking for. Try to keep some doors open. If you're trying to get out there to learn some stuff and they say, well, we're not really looking for a guest piercer, or, maybe just say like, I would like to cover basics, or I'd like to cover your counter. I'd like to cover earlobe piercings, cartilage piercings, because some studios, they're going to have an ample need for that. Sometimes if it's a studio that has multiple piercers running at once, one person that can go in and handle some of the more simple tasks might be a really like welcome thing, so that some of their staff can rotate out, have time off, have holidays, things like that. But, maybe don't try to just jump into it and say like, I can do anything, anytime, any place, if you don't really think that you're ready for that. So have some realistic expectations, have some realistic goals, but still, I really want to encourage people out there to put themselves out there, because that made a massive difference for me. I think it made a massive difference for you too.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to hit on that subject?
No, I think that we pretty much covered it. So from the point of, we don't know what perspective this question was asked from. So from the perspective of someone looking for guests, I would say my advice would be come up with what's essentially a work advert. You don't have to be completely set on your pay scale if it's going to be dependent on experience, but you could let them know that it's up for negotiation. You could let them know what's included, in terms of travel, accommodation, hours, what's expected from them. Really put out as much information as you can to encourage people to get in touch, because if there's not a lot of information, people might be afraid to reach out and ask those questions, and it might put people off applying. So really provide as much information as you can to try and be competitive and let people know it's a serious opportunity. And from the perspective of someone looking to get into the business of doing guest spots, kind of do a similar thing where you can write up a proposal for yourself and say, here's what it costs to have me, here's what I can offer, and just let people know what they're getting when they have you as a guest.
Going back to the previous question too, it'll make a huge difference if you actually have a portfolio or a website or that piercer footprint to show them. These are the things that I've done. These are healed photos. These are initial photos. This is the variety of stuff that I can do in your studio. If you don't have those things, it's going to be tougher to have some of these conversations later on in your career. And also with the APP conference coming up, if you're someone who's going to be in Las Vegas, have conversations, make contacts, talk to people. Hey, do you have guest piercers in your studio? Would that be something you're interested in? And what does that mean for your studio? So there's a lot of different ways that you could tackle a subject like that.
And just as a side note as well, when I was having guests out in Forest for the first time, which was a completely new and scary experience for me, having people be my guest as opposed to being the guest, one of the things I did as a follow-up was ask for feedback, provided feedback, and said, hey, if I'm having other guests, would it be okay if I used you as a reference, if they wanted a reference from me? And did that kind of stuff, so that if somebody did want to come and guest with me, or I invited someone, I would actually have a reference from someone else that had done it to say, this is an okay place, this is what happened, this is how it went. So think about things like that. Like you were saying about people not having much of a digital footprint, I think the more you treat your job like a job, the more professional interactions you start to get in a positive way.
Yeah.
So the next question we received was what to change in your studio if you're looking to switch to a Statim autoclave. How does storing tools and jewellery work? How will reprocessing change? Ryan's going to take the lead on this because there have been some relevant changes to APP standards recently, is that right?
Yeah, so there's going to be a big thing coming down the road. If you're currently an APP member, or if you're a prospective member, realize that some of the APP membership requirements are getting some updates. And one of them will be that a Class S or a Class M autoclave will be required, meaning you'd have to have a closed door vacuum dry cycle. So there's going to be a wide portion of autoclaves that are out there in the field, that are out there in piercing studios, that will no longer be acceptable by APP membership standards. And to be completely honest, mine included. I use a Tuttenauer 2340M for like the bulk sterilization, like anything in packages basically. And I'm going to be upgrading that sometime around the end of this year for the APP membership updates. And I think this is a great time, if you're not a Statim studio, to look into it, because a Statim would certainly meet that Class S, Class M requirement, but they're not really ideal for large quantities of packaged materials. There are different, there's the 2,000, 5,000, 7,000, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I don't even necessarily think that that's directly what this question is in reference to. My interpretation of it is clean storage. I think what this person is asking about is, how does clean storage work? Because when you're a reprocessing studio and you're talking about an autoclave for packaged items, which is what I do in my studio, you take an item, you use the item and make it contaminated. Then you can move that into your reprocessing area. In my studio, that will mean a soak, and then an ultrasonic, rinsing, drying, packaging, and then re-autoclaving. And that's the same way that a lot of studios operate, that dental offices operate, a lot of different medical offices operate. But if you're in a studio that doesn't have like a large front-loading autoclave, if you're not set up to process large amounts of packaged material, another way that a Statim can be utilized is you fully reprocess an item and then you would bulk sterilize it. Meaning, like, if you had 10 clamps, you can use those 10 clamps, reprocess those 10 clamps, then you drop them in a Statim unwrapped, sterilize them so that they're inert, so that they can be handled safely, stored safely. They're no longer contaminated, but they're not sterile because they're not packaged. So I feel like this is kind of like a hybrid method. I think newer studios that are getting built now will have that mentality that you have, that Jeff Saunders have. We have that episode that we recorded, just the last episode, where you talked about different things about new studios, and Jeff's opening a studio, your latest studio, are designed to be disposable. So it's new items going into a Statim, not reprocessed items. So you can take a reprocessed item, you reprocess it, you bulk sterilize it so it's inert, and then I think essentially what you would do is basically just put it into a drawer. So there are going to be some studios at the end of this year, when their front-loading autoclaves are going to be kind of phased out, they might determine that they don't really want or need another front-loading autoclave, and that another way they can use those same tools in a reprocessing studio is to bulk sterilize their tools and then put them into clean storage. So my interpretation of that would be, you reprocess the item, you bulk sterilize it to make it inert, and then you basically just put it in a drawer under your Statim, or in some sort of like preparation area. So then when you have your Statim cassette and you're loading it up for your cycle, you can load your needles and jewelry like a lot of Statim users would typically use, but then you can also open that drawer, you can take out a tool, then you'll load that in the cassette, sterilize it, and then you have everything you need right in that one cassette. So as far as like storing tools and jewelry, like, I think most studios are already going to be familiar with, where does your jewelry live before it's sterilized, where do your needles live before they're sterilized. If you're a studio that's going from, we order everything pre-sterilized, everything shows up to our shop in a package, I think you're going to have a lot more of a change. But if we're talking about those studios where they're just kind of dropping their front-loading autoclave, I think that'll be a pretty easy process for you. Just replacing the front-loading autoclave with the Statim. You'll still need to reprocess used items, properly decontaminate, properly reprocess, dry them, bulk sterilize them so that they're inert, so that they're no longer a biological risk, and then you can put them into clean storage. I know that that's probably a ton of information. If somebody's not already familiar with this kind of like working style, that might have just sounded like word soup to you, but hopefully some piercers out there, it'll kind of click in their minds and they'll be able to visualize it. There's the disposable only world, there's the reprocessing world, there's the front loaders, the Statim world. I think what you're kind of asking for is more of a hybrid sort of style. Do you have any takes on that, or is that just way too much information for people?
Just a small tip, really. As somebody who's been just working out of a Statim for the last 4 years, and before that I only worked out of a front-loading autoclave. Everything was pre-packaged. Jewellery would arrive in the studio, be bulk processed, packaged and labelled, and we would have a month's worth of jewellery in storage. So going from that to going from you make up basically piercings to order in your Statim, just
A la carte.
sterilizing what you need. Very, very different processes. So I've done both. And something that I would say is just a little tip is that when you switch over to using a Statim, people think, well, you know, for every service that I'm going to offer, I'm going to run the Statim. I do a lot of downsizes, so I'll prep downsize posts in advance. So I'll have like a run of all of my most common downsize posts, and I'll keep them packaged and in clean, dry storage, so that when people come into the studio, I can just perform their downsizes immediately. And you wouldn't think that it was a major thing, but if you're not doing this, it saves thousands of Statim cycles a year, like at least 1,000 Statim cycles a year. And that's water that I'm putting through the distiller every year. I mean, that's hundreds of water distiller cycles
Energy,
a year.
which probably means
Right.
a big deal in the UK.
Right. So in the UK, where energy prices the last couple of years have been, you know, completely extortionate and have kind of gone a little bit back down, but not to what they were. Maybe it's more relevant to me, but when you think about it in those terms, if it's not something that you're doing, you are talking about like thousands of hours of energy that you can just like completely cut out.
Well, it's also got to be a huge amount of time too, because if you're talking about downsizes specifically, you know, every Statim cycle is going to be, let's say, around 8 minutes. And just imagine like how many downsizes do you do in a month and multiply that by 8 minutes and think of the amount of time you could save if you just bulk sterilized. Like a Statim, you can totally run packaged items. You can run lots of packaged items through it. It's just not very efficient if you need to run large amounts of large packaged items, like a whole bunch of clamps, a whole bunch of prep packs. Something like that's going to take you several cycles because you might only be able to put 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 in a cycle. But if we're talking about like little bits of jewelry, you can run 100 of those packaged in one Statim cycle cassette. That's probably a bit much for one subject. All right, so this next question, I think you should take the lead on it. How do you order your jewelry? I feel like every time I place an order, I immediately run out of something else that wasn't even on my radar. I know that you have a pretty specific system about jewelry ordering. I have mine too, but maybe I'll talk about it after you.
So I use a PAR system, which I have to credit to Kale. She was the first person that I saw teach a class on stock management that involved the PAR system. And that, for people that don't know, is basically a stock system that says, say you start out with 50 pieces in a certain size and you lose 3. The system will then say 47. Or you use 3, not lose 3. The system will then say 47. And then when you come to order, you look at it, it says 47. So you know, oh, I have to order 3 because 50 is my baseline. So it's kind of creating a baseline for all of the sizes and different types of jewelry that you want to have in stock. So that's what I use in my work. And I actually really kind of sold myself short when I set up my own business, because for the first year or so, I told myself I didn't need a PAR system because I wasn't selling enough jewelry and I didn't have enough jewelry. And I was like, maybe when I'm bigger, you know, that'll be helpful, but I'm too small time for that to make a difference. And I was so wrong. I was so completely wrong. The smaller your business is, the more essential it is to have a system like that, because it means that you can target exactly where you spend your money, right down to each individual post. I mean, there were months when I opened Forest 1 and now in my new location, what I call Forest 2, but it's still just Forest. There have been so many situations where I've had a really limited budget and you're down to a couple of £100 to do top-ups, and it's like, right, where exactly do I need this money to go so that it can be as impactful and efficient as possible? And PAR systems are great for that. I mean, I'll place an order where I'm like, I only need 3 of this thing, and it's so weirdly specific, but it's exactly what I need. And when you don't do that, you do this thing where you have this like bias towards jewelry types that we use all of the time.
What does it feel like I need?
Yeah, well, I need a lot of this size. I always need that. So just chuck on 20 of them and chuck on 20 of them and chuck on 20 of them. And before you know it, you end up with like 60 of something that you hardly ever use. And that might not be a big deal if you're a bigger studio that can absorb that cost. But if you're a small studio, that could have been jewellery that could have been far more useful in the short term and that you could have turned around a lot faster. So being incredibly specific with what you need to order helps a lot. I would also say that one of the challenges facing people that have to order jewellery now is the variety of companies we often have to order from to get everything we need. As more companies have opened up offering more products, which is overall a very good thing, not all of them offer a full line of sizes or line of styles. So we find ourselves having to kind of bunny hop from one company to the other to get different things. So learning how to stagger your ordering so that you're not placing them all at once, but maybe you're ordering from one company this month, then the next company the following month, then the next company the following month.
I kind of feel like you're attacking me right now, because that's exactly what I do.
That's what I'm saying you should do.
Well, no. I mean, like, I order everything at once, and then I'm like, why do I have a $10,000 credit card bill this month?
Yeah. So I try and stagger my orders because I do have a smaller budget as a smaller studio. So because I stagger the way that I order, that helps me not run out of things, at least all at the same time. And what I would say is, like, give yourself a little bit of a break, because if you're working a studio that offers a relatively full service of piercings, you're talking at least at a bare minimum of basics, like 75 different items that can easily go over 100 if you're talking about doing, millimeter increment sizes for each piercing. So say you have 100 different sizes that you could possibly cover and you're sold out of 5, you have 95% all of the stock that you could possibly have. It's not logistically possible all the time to just have everything all of the time, and I think that that's a bit of an unrealistic expectation, and maybe partly one that we put on ourselves, and maybe partly one that instant consumer culture has put on us. But it's really not that unusual to have 1 or 2 sizes here or there that are currently out of stock.
Yeah, especially in this world where things come in 1 millimeter increments. A lot of times it's not going to be a big deal if somebody gets 1 millimeter bigger or smaller than they need, as long as it fits their anatomy appropriately. Another thing that I'd like to mention, we talk about on this podcast, like, certain professional things. Having a portfolio is a professional step, having that larger footprint and asking for guest spots and things like that. For me, it was a huge difference in my business when I was actually looking at analytics, because I actually had a POS system that could show me analytics. That same kind of bias of like, well, yeah, obviously we need to order a bunch of this because this has always been popular. What if you have a system where you can look at it and it tells you exactly what people have bought in the last 3 months, or what they bought in the same 3-month period last year, so you can actually see trends. Like, a PAR system can be really helpful for your month-to-month ordering. You set a PAR level, like, I want to make sure that we have 10 of this in stock at all times. Then when you do your inventory and it says, okay, you only have 4 of those in stock, you better order 6 more. Like, that's what a PAR system is. But also analytics can be super helpful. If you're thinking in your mind like, obviously I need to be focusing on naval jewelry because we're very low on naval jewelry. Well, what if it's not the time of year where you're doing all of your naval piercings? Maybe your money can be spent better somewhere else. So having a POS system that can show you long-term analytics can also make a huge difference. Those PAR systems can make a huge difference when you're actually like making an order, but I find that analytics helps me to determine what I'm ordering at what times of year, basically. I'll order certain things seasonally. I'll want to plan out certain lines to make sure that I'm very well stocked on certain things for the summer or back to school season or Christmas holidays, things like that. So analytics, PAR systems, all those different things. I think the running trend of this podcast is just sometimes you need to step up the back office stuff or the different little professional things that support poking people with a needle and putting in jewelry. I've made the biggest strides in my studio when I've been putting in more energy in the office. So I think a lot of things like that can help.
Well, something that helped me, because I'm not very good at reading text on like just plain text on a white background. Like when I look at a spreadsheet, I feel like my brain turns to liquid. Like it's very difficult for me to read, and that could cause me to like bob around different lines and forget what I'm looking at. So something that I actually do that you'll probably have seen from looking at my system is that my power system is color coded, so that if I have a lot of something, the box is green, and if I'm kind of starting to get low, it's amber, and then if I'm completely out, it's red. So whenever I make an order, I just open it up and I just go straight to the red boxes, and they're what I put on first, and then it's the amber, and then it's like if there's anything that I miss out, I'm a lot less likely to come up short. So that's something that helps me, just from someone who's not very good at like being able to look at numbers and sometimes has trouble with back office stuff.
Yeah, there are different POS systems you can integrate into your studio that can automatically give you notifications like, hey, you're low on this, you're low on that. But you do have to keep an accurate inventory if you're going to try a system like that. It can't just be you have a mountain of jewelry and then you're kind of opening a drawer and peeking in. Like I've done that too. I still do that with some stuff in my studio, to be honest. And it's the least efficient way to order something, is just standing in front of a wall full of like jewelry boxes and opening up one at a time and being like, oh, this looks low. Oh, this looks low. But, POS systems can help. And another small analog thing that both of us utilize in our studio is just a whiteboard. Yeah. We both have whiteboards in our studio. I have one right in my Statim area. So, like, when we're loading up jewelry for the Statim, if me or if Evan, my other piercer, if we notice that something is getting a little bit low, or if there's something that we might want to expand or something, we put it on the whiteboard. And then every time I'm going in to make orders, I'll peek at the whiteboard and I'll see if anything was added to that might be a little bit outside of my PAR system or my analytics. And that really helps me to kind of keep my finger on the pulse about trends too, like month-to-month trends. Something as simple as a whiteboard can make a world of difference.
I think probably the most like rudimentary thing that any piercer could do, if they don't already, is just go to the effort of writing the jewellery size on their consent form. Like I do that, I know a lot of shops do, there's a lot that don't. And then you actually have it, it's on paper, and that makes it harder to view the big picture without meticulously going through it. But if you're somebody that has like a limited ability to maybe do some of the digital stuff or struggles with that, you can make it as simple as just a tally sheet on paper if that's what works better for you. So it doesn't have to be complicated, it just has to be something to help give you a better overview of what you've used that month and what your projections are. The only other thing I would add is like I said before, try and go easy on yourself, because we're definitely in a culture right now of like, well, why don't you have it? Why don't you have this thing?
Why aren't you doing everything?
We've talked about it before, the way it feels when a client says, is this everything you have? And the same goes for even offering basics too. I'll still get someone come in and ask for a really obscure size in something simple that just never comes up for me amongst my client base. And in that moment, you're like, I'm sorry, I don't carry that particular thing. And it can make you feel like a little bit of a failure sometimes, but you have to remember a lot of that is immediate consumer culture and marketing online that says to people, a good studio would carry this, and then they come into yours and you don't have it. Yeah. So try and be easy on yourself, and remember that most businesses, not just small but major retailers, don't have 100% of everything they sell in stock 100% of the time. That's almost impossible.
It's a unrealistic goal to think that you can or should have everything, and especially if you're a smaller business, a growing business. Especially if you're a little bit newer to things like analytics, PAR systems, inventory, things like that, just get a hold on what you have in the studio now. And then, that can help you make those targeted orders to say like, well, what's a good investment for me to expand into? You need to know what you have to know what you need to reorder or to know what you want to expand into. So, hopefully some of those tips can help. But, to be honest, some of it also is just like, chaos. Jewelry ordering can be a little chaotic.
Don't just round up to 10 for no reason. If you need 3, buy 3. Even if it's unsatisfying and weird, like setting off your alarm at an odd hour, at like 8:13 or something.
Although I do love my quantity discounts.
Yeah.
Why don't you read this next one?
Okay. Advice for piercers that went through a bad apprenticeship that now know better and want to do better.
So the thing about that is try not to beat yourself up too much. Like every year when I do the scholarship process for the APP, a lot of those applicants, they're like, I wasn't taught everything like in my apprenticeship, and it'd be like, I didn't even have an apprenticeship. Like, try not to beat yourself up if you don't already know everything. Like, we're talking about realistic goals and long-term goals, things like that. Like, it's okay to not know everything. Like, this is a long career for a lot of people. So think about where you want to be in 5 years, in 10 years. Sometimes it's okay to specialize in a smaller variety of piercings, or to not be like super duper familiar with 10 different methods to perform a piercing. So if you got a bad apprenticeship, or if you're like me and you never even got any kind of apprenticeship, if you just kind of did trial and error and stumbled your way through something, if you had access to a shop and you were just like, oh hey, you're the piercer now, like, that's not the worst thing in the world. Try to just seek out information and, you know, find it in a way that's comfortable to you, whether that's an in-person thing, whether that's seeking out something like guest spotting or shadowing, going to a conference, watching a video, reading a book. Like, there are lots of different ways to learn, but try not to beat yourself up too much if you don't already know it all.
I think that this is a tough time to be coming up as a piercer. I think there's definitely a unique set of pressures involved now. I mean, there have always been unique pressures in any kind of an apprenticeship or getting into any industry, but specific to this time period, we're living in a time period that is very much the do as we say, not as we did era, because the time that we're at now, the majority of older and more experienced piercers that you know didn't have, you know, air quotes, a proper apprenticeship. The majority, not a small amount, but most of them. And even now in 2024, if we're talking about high quality apprenticeships, not just a decent apprenticeship, but real high quality access to the best information, I mean, you're maybe talking about, what, 5% of piercers? It's such a small amount.
The most common experience that I encounter, like being someone who's been to a lot of different conferences, met a lot of different piercers in a lot of different parts of the world, the most common story I hear is, I had a shit apprenticeship, and then, you know, after a year or two or three or however many, I started to get a sense of, you know, I don't know what I don't know. And then they started to seek out information, and then they kind of grew from there. Maybe they had to move to a different studio. Maybe they had to find a different mentor or a conference or something. But I think that's the most common experience I hear out there, is I was thrown into it with very little training, with very little mentorship, if any at all. I might have been shown a few things by someone who was a tattooer full time, or, you know, whatever the scenario is. And now that I'm a little bit more into it, now that I'm taking it really seriously as a potentially long-term career, now I want to better myself. And sometimes that means finding your own path. And that's probably the most common thing. It's an incredibly rare experience for someone to say, you know, I worked in a studio that had every toy and trick and piece of jewelry in Statim, and I was apprenticed and I was trained by, like, you know, this amazing piercer already, and given every little bit of resource and access. Like, that is incredibly rare. So if you're not in that category, you know, welcome to being part of the rest of us.
Yeah, you can't let it psych you out and make you feel like you're on this sort of underside of the coin in piercing because you didn't come from this proper apprenticeship fantasy that people seem to think exists, but in most cases doesn't. If you didn't come from a proper apprenticeship, you're probably just a regular piercer. I think people that have come from high quality apprenticeships, I'm sure that they've worked really hard for them and they've put in a lot of effort, I would certainly hope, but they are the minority, and I don't think that having those opportunities makes them inherently better in terms of you know, who they are as people or who they go on to be as workers. It's what you do with the opportunities that you have, and there are piercers that we both know that have come from backgrounds that are very imperfect, that are amazing body piercers today that we hugely admire and whose work that we love. So it's not always about how you come up or the background that you come from, it's what you do with everything you can get your hands on, and how much you throw yourself into the work that you do, and how much you jump on the opportunities that are available to you, or make the opportunities for yourself. So I think it's an important thing to not convince yourself that you shouldn't be where you are, or give yourself that sense of imposter syndrome. I think a lot of people almost apologize when they meet you sometimes, and they're like, I came from XYZ, and you're just like, don't like turn your head down and say that. Like, who do you think you're surrounded by? Who do you think you're talking to? Like, it's absolutely not a negative or anything anybody should feel bad about, I don't think. I think it's something that most piercers have in common. So yeah, I guess my advice would be, if you have the awareness to know that you weren't in the best situation, and now you want to know better and do better, then just keep following your instincts and looking for opportunities and making connections, because it's such an in-person industry. Travel, meet piercers anywhere that you can, visit studios that you want to gain knowledge at, and just do everything that you can to keep yourself in the industry if you're not currently in a place of employment. But yeah, what do you think about it?
Well, I mean, not everybody's first car is going to be a Lamborghini. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have like my first car was a 1987 Ford Escort hatchback. And then I got nicer cars as I got older. And it's the same kind of thing about body piercing. Like, most people, like, your foot in the door of a shop is probably going to be like a local tattoo shop. Maybe they also do some piercing. Maybe you have a friend that pierces and they're going to show you a few things. Or maybe you just kind of fell into it. Like, I just fell into it. The first shop I ever worked in was an air quotes, massage parlor that was doing like maybe some hand job stuff in a back room. And I was just like thrown in as like, oh yeah, you want to be a piercer? And I was like, yeah, I've been piercing people in a spare bedroom in my house. Like, it was the mid 90s. So like, if people are like, oh yeah, and this guy's teaching classes and has a podcast and whatever else, it's like, I had to work really hard for the things that I know and for the access that I had. And it's okay if you're kind of in that category too. Like, very few people get everything on day one. If you are one of those fortunate few, like, congratulations. But most people have to grind it out over a long period of time. So don't feel bad if you didn't get a perfect apprenticeship. Just keep working, keep growing, and just realize that it's a long-term career. And, that whole never stop learning kind of mentality, just keep going.
Yeah, I think that because piercing is still, in most parts of the world at least, not a profession that has a lot of authentic certification, and it's not something where you can just go to school for it and then be able to do it. It's not a foregone conclusion like other industries where if you just keep showing up, you'll get a job and a career out of it. You really have to fight sometimes tooth and nail to find a way into the industry and stay into the industry. And so many of us have come through. I mean, I left high school when I was 15, I've said before on the podcast. I didn't get very much formal higher education, didn't go to university or anything like that. And there are so many people that come into the industry that don't have strong formal education backgrounds and come from all different kinds of backgrounds. So I think that it's just kind of really elitist and classist and wrong to allow yourself to look at yourself and think that you don't belong somewhere. So I think that you have to get over that psychologically. Just get over the fact that this is something that could hold you back and just not let it.
Yeah.
So this is a question that you can maybe delve into a little bit more than me. What made you realize you wanted to get into teaching and that side of piercing?
My massive ego. I mean, if I gave any other answer, I'd be lying. No, so I started going to the APP conference in 2002, I believe, and I was blown away. And I was blown away by the conference experience, and it was on just so many different forefronts. I don't know if I ever told a story on the podcast or not, but my very first conference, I was sitting in the back of the room each time. I didn't know anybody, really nervous to try to talk to anybody because I just felt like, how am I worthy among all these people? I'm just some kid from New Hampshire. And a piercer named Alicia Cardenas just came and sat down right next to me because she saw that I was sitting there not talking to anybody, just by myself, and she was like, "Hey, how's it going? How's conference doing for you?" And like her putting in that effort to say hi to someone, and then seeing her walk up to the front of the class and teach, and she just blew my mind with the information and the confidence and the abilities that she was like showcasing. And it wasn't just Alicia, it was the whole conference. There were piercers that I had maybe like kind of lurked, and this is way before Facebook. This is like around the BME days kind of thing. I was like lurking, and I was like seeing piercers that I recognized from there, piercers that I recognized from magazines, and they were just like so smart and so confident and so skilled. And I was like, man, I want to be there one day. So first it was like I really wanted to push, and I really wanted to just understand the information that they were giving out in their classes, try to incorporate that into my studio and into my practices. And then once I got years on from there, then it turned into kind of like a personal thing for me, where it was like, well, I feel like I need to maybe share some of this information that I've had access to. And through talking to people behind the scenes, I became really good friends with Caitlin McDermott and with other people, and kind of getting these little boosts of confidence of like, well, have you ever considered maybe putting in a proposal to teach a class? There was a long period at the APP conference where it was lecture style only. Everything was some sort of variation on like a PowerPoint. But then it was like, well, what if we did more hands-on stuff? And I think that I would be a more of like a learner that wants to learn by doing, and not just like sitting or reading. So when I started to have these other ideas of like, well, what if there are other people out there that want to learn the way that I want to learn, and try to make classes for them. So that's really where it started for me, is like I wanted to learn in a certain way, so I wanted to try to help other people learn in that same way if they weren't like a lecture learner, if that makes sense. Going to something like BMXNet, when I started going there, I think it was 2008, and seeing their teaching style there, very workshop oriented, and that really kind of inspired me of like, well, a lot of this stuff would be amazing in Vegas. So I think that's where it started from. I learned information. I felt like I wanted to try to take that information and maybe disperse it with a different teaching style. That's kind of where it started for me. And I think over time, just like you can learn some skills as a piercer, I think I learned how to convey information better, and it just kind of rolled and rolled and rolled. I did okay, I guess, and I got some more opportunities, and I really love it. I love teaching and sharing information now. What about you? Like, what was your first? Wasn't I like a training wheel co-instructor for one of your first classes?
Yeah, so I taught my first class at UKPP. It was either the second or third year. It was when it was still in Birmingham. And it was the first time I'd attended the event. So I think it might have been the second year, or maybe the third year total. I know the first meetup was, the meetup, and then they did the first conference. I think this was the second conference, the third year kind of thing. I met Nikki Holmes, who was the president of the UKPP at the time. I met her in Germany at BMXNet, and she, welcomed me and introduced me to a bunch of colleagues that I didn't know, because I'm not a very social person. Most people know that. I'm very kind of private and very anxious, especially being around people I don't know. And she was really welcoming and really encouraged me to come to an event and to join. And she was the one that pushed me to do some instructing. It wasn't something that I asked to do or volunteered to do. She was like, I think you'd be good at this. How would you feel about doing this? And she really pushed me to take part. And I didn't know at all what I was meant to be doing, because I hadn't been to the event before, so I didn't know what format it would take. So I had to put a lot of thought into what is it that it's going to be when I turn up. I'm not really sure. But that day was my first day teaching. I taught 3 back-to-back classes. There was a needle bending workshop. That was with you and Jeff. That was the first class that I ever instructed. When I went to walk in the class, they said, you can't come in, the class hasn't started yet. And I had to say, I'm instructing with this class to get in. And I actually met Jeff for the first time in the class because he was a little bit late because I think he'd had some flight issues. So he came in. You and I just, you started. You were like, well, we have to start. And I was like, oh, Jeff's not here. And you were like, doesn't matter. We have to start on time. So you started. I had no idea what was happening, but it was a hands-on workshop, so we kind of split up into 3 groups, and we had the classes rotate round the 3 tables, and we all showed them our style of needle bending. And Jeff arrived, and that was when I met him the first time, was in a class we were teaching together. And then the next thing that I instructed was with you, and I don't think that it was with Brian, but Brian was there helping. So it was you and me together, and I can't remember what the other thing was. Maybe it was just 2 classes, but with 3 co-instructors. But I remember I was talking for the full day. Oh, in fact, you know what? It was anodizing, I think, with Brian. So I was doing needle bending with you and Jeff, then anodizing with Brian as his kind of assistant, and someone fell asleep in that class. I remember, because I was like, oh no, am I doing terribly? But it's okay. He just be like that. And then in the 3rd one, it was me and you. And that was the first time that I did any instructing.
Well, that's certainly like trial by fire.
Yeah, but I have I have quite bad self-confidence a lot of the time. Like, you know that. I often talk bad about myself to myself, which isn't something that you should do. It's not a good thing. You should always talk good about you to you. But I also have this little fuck you voice in my head that's like, I can't do this. I'm going to be terrible at this. And then I have this other voice that's like, well, that's why we're going to do it anyway. And it makes no sense. But I have this thing that's like, I bet nobody thinks we can do this, so we should go and do it. And we're just going to give it our best shot and see what happens.
And prove them wrong.
It's almost like when you want to like touch a hot stove. There's just something that's like, this sounds like a terrible idea. I bet you're going to completely fall flat on your face. Let's go and do it, you know? And I think that you should, it's the best kind of intrusive thought.
Well, I'm glad that I was there for it. Like at the time, I didn't know you really at all. This was like years ago. What would you take a guess at the year?
I think it was 2005. Oh, sorry, 2015 or maybe 2000. I think it was 2015 or 2016.
Yeah. So I mean, I knew that you were like the Scottish piercer. Like I didn't know anything else about you really. And I remember being in some of those classes, and we were just kind of stuck in there as like, if things go horribly wrong and Lola just like has an anxiety attack or like poops herself, like at least you'll be there to take over. And like I barely got a chance to speak because you did really, really good. And I remember like you just really, you shocked people in the best way, where it was like she's untested, we're going to put her in here and see how she does. And then you nailed it. And it was like, great, well, she can teach the next one.
Well, I think that part of that comes from the fact that I am from a very big family. And then when I started piercing, it was in a tattoo studio with a lot of big personalities. And at that point, very little emphasis put on piercing. Like I was trying to grow it every year, but it wasn't the main portion of the business. And from that, I kind of developed a sense of like, nobody's gonna let you talk. You have to talk. Like you have to find the spaces to talk and then fill that space in the moment, because then the moment will be gone and you won't get another chance. Yeah. So I think like that's what I mean when I talk about taking an opportunity and just giving it 100% and seeing what happens. And just kind of like you say, hitting the ground running. And it was terrifying for me. It was a terrifying experience to do that for the first time and have it be in front of so many peers and people I'd never met and piercing heroes and all that kind of thing. But there's also this thing in your head where you're like, you have to nail this. Like, wouldn't it be great if you nailed it? Like, what if everything goes okay and you don't poop yourself and fall flat on you? Like, what if that happens? And you have to also remember, because I had people asking questions and shouting out a little bit as well, and it's like, you have to remember that you're doing this for a reason, because you know this stuff. Like, you know this stuff and this is your job, and you have to have that little voice. You have to try and listen for it amongst all of the other little voices that are telling you you're going to fail. You have to try and tune into the one that's like, yeah, but fuck it, let's just do it.
For better or worse, I think day one teaching is going to be a little bit more challenging now, because there are so many experienced teachers at this point, and there's a huge list of people that are prospective teachers, the people that want to be at the front of the room. Like every year, I really don't envy the APP's curriculum committee, because every year they're going to get a tidal wave of pitches for classes, a lot of proposals that are going to be really similar. I think I've talked to some people around curriculum saying like, well, we got like 5 suggestions, 5 proposals for the same subject. And it's like, well, how do you choose who's going to teach it? Because all the people who don't get picked are going to be upset. So it's tougher now. If you want to teach, I don't think it's really appropriate for, same thing, going back to the guest piercing thing, same thing of like, you have to know what you're ready for. You can have that confidence to say like, yeah, I'm ready for it. But be honest with yourself too. If you've never taught a class before, if you've never done any kind of public speaking before, why should you be the one chosen to stand up at the front of the room and deliver for a conference for people that paid to be there and people who really want to be educated? If you want a little bit of like maybe practice to get ready to maybe propose a class, to pitch a class, to teach a class, maybe find your voice as a public speaker, however that manifests for you. Maybe write some articles and fully articulate a thought in like an educational process. So there are a lot of different things you can do to prepare yourself to teach. I think today there will be fewer and fewer opportunities of people just getting thrown into teaching and that sink or swim kind of mentality. I think now they want people showing up who can definitely swim and know they can swim. So I guess just practice swimming, I guess, maybe as a suggestion.
And it doesn't hurt to be well rehearsed.
No.
That's something that I do work hard on still. And like Ryan says, don't be afraid of a little rejection. The class that I'm teaching at APP this year isn't the first time I've submitted it. I've submitted it before and it hasn't been wanted or needed for that specific event, and it hasn't fitted in at that time, and that's fine because there's so much to pack in. So you can't take it as a personal slight when you come up against professional rejection. Sometimes you can't let it discourage you from trying again and again if it's something that you want to do, because the chances are it's definitely nothing personal. It just wasn't something that fitted into that particular event or something that was being covered by someone else. So I think that it's important as well to not be discouraged if you fall down at the first hurdle.
Okay, the last question, and also just, thank you, the people who took time to submit questions. Sometimes we have ideas on subjects, sometimes we need some ideas for subjects. So thank you so much to everyone who took some time to submit a question. The last question we're going to get to on this episode will be, if you could change one thing about our industry, what would it be and why? And I want you to go first.
This reminds me a little bit of that old movie, The Time Machine, where, I don't know, have you ever seen it?
I don't know. Who was in it?
Oh, I can't remember the actor's name now. But he travels to the future, and then he uses his time machine to travel home, and he takes 3 books with him, and then goes back to the future. Different movie. And the ending of the film is like, what 3 books would you take? Like if you were like creating a new society or whatever, and it's meant to be very kind of, sounds a bit naff when I say it, but it's meant to be
Twilight. Number 1.
Legally Blonde.
No.
Yeah. I just want to take it as read. I mean, I don't want to like take things to like a negative place, but I want to take it as read that obviously both of us would support a complete end of abuse in the industry. Yeah. I don't want anyone to think that that wouldn't be both of our first choices. So taking that as read, aside from that, what would I change in the industry? And I'm going to answer it from a current perspective, like what would I change right now? Apart from seam rings and fresh piercings, I would change the speed at which we're trying to make ourselves grow. I would change the fast pace and the need for rapid growth and expansion, and just being able to do and know and sell and pierce everything in 3 years or less into your career in the industry. I think that, like, for me, my dream now, like my goal as a piercer isn't to be like famous on the internet or wildly busy every day. It's just to sustain myself and be comfortable and happy Like, I want to be doing this job for another couple of decades. It's not all about growth. It's not all about opening up multiple premises and expanding and getting bigger and better every year. That's something that I would change, was this sense that you have to just be crushing it every day and growing and expanding. I think if anything, I've retracted and withdrawn this past year a little bit, and it's definitely been needed and necessary for my business's longevity. Like, I have a plan again now for what the next 4 to 5 years are going to be like for me, and in order to achieve that, I had to slow down and really think about those things for a year. So I would say if there was one thing that I would change, is that it would just be the pace. What about you? What would you change?
The myth of the perfect piercer.
You saying I'm not real?
No.
I'm so
You're like
stupid.
Bigfoot. No, like just the concept that there is a piercer out there in the world, or that every piercer should be available to their clients 24/7. They never make a mistake. They never accidentally install the wrong piece of jewelry. They never give the wrong aftercare advice or troubleshooting advice. They answer every single email 2 minutes after they get it. It's such an unrealistic goal. Like the myth of the perfect piercer that has been formed through social media, because it's all about marketing. Like it used to manifest itself in a way where people would, they would take out a bad piece of jewelry and then they would make a whole big Facebook post about like, oh, I would never install this piece of jewelry. And it's like, but I've done things like that earlier in my career. Like I wasn't hatched out of an egg as like a really experienced piercer. Like I'm a human being. I'm flawed. Sometimes I've given the wrong advice. Sometimes I've done a piercing that just hasn't been able to heal and I've had to pull it. And I'm not talking about like 20 years ago in my career. I'm talking about like, last year or something. Like, piercers make mistakes, and that's okay because we're human beings. I think that younger piercers especially need to stop beating themselves up, thinking that they can't ever make a mistake and that mistakes aren't part of growth, that they can't talk honestly when they talk to other piercers, when they talk to their peers, whether it's online or in person, at a conference, whatever, that they can't talk honestly about who they are and what they're doing, the jewelry they're using and their studio. And people always come from this place of shame where they're like, oh yeah, I don't want to invite you to my studio because I don't want you to see the state of it and all. And it's like, I don't want people to come to my studio now and see the state of it. And I feel like I'm working in my dream studio, but I still see the flaws of it. So like, you can't beat yourself over the head trying to live up to this false expectation of the perfect piercer, because there is no perfect piercer. I know lots of really good piercers, and I know that they've all made small mistakes, and they're trying to learn and move forward and hopefully not make those same mistakes again. So piercers, whether you've been in it for a year or 20, you need to realize that we're human beings, and we're flawed human beings, socially, professionally, whatever. And just kind of go a little bit easier on yourselves. People put so much pressure on themselves that they can't take it when they make these small everyday mistakes. And it's like, it's going to be part of every day, because these are everyday small errors that we can make. And that's okay. It's okay to be human being, to be a human being and be a body piercer at the same time. So that's probably the one thing for me.
I think that's a good point.
Thank you. I'm an angel.
Yeah.
Well, I want to wrap it up here. And again, thank you to everyone who submitted questions. Thank you to you, Lola Slider.
You're so welcome.
For answering all these questions with me. I'd like to remind everybody that if you happen to be in Las Vegas for the APP Conference 2024, please stop by and say hi to us at the expo booth. We're going to have some giveaway stuff. We're going to have some stuff for sale. Lots of cool t-shirts, lots of cool stickers, lots of cool stuff. And we want to just meet people. We like talking to piercers and hanging out. So come by and say hi to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's made, I mean, it's not made by us, it's made by you. I'm just here. But it's made by you for free for people to enjoy, and it does help us enormously to meet some of those people and learn about what they like, what they're interested in, what aspects of the podcast they enjoy, so we can keep doing a good job in making it something that they want to listen to.
Yeah, and we're also coming up on episode 250 soon, which I think we're probably going to end up recording while we're at conference. So pretty special. Thanks for listening, and thanks for supporting the show. And, if you do enjoy the show, or if there are parts of the show that you think we can do better, you can give us very gentle advice or requests or something. But come say hi in Vegas, because we like talking about piercing. So I've been Ryan. You've been...
Hungry.
Yeah, I'm hungry too. I want a smash burger. But stick around for more. We got more coming. Bye.
Bye.
For more information about the show, visit piercingwizardpodcast.com or like Piercing Wizard Podcast on Facebook. For more info about your host, visit precisionbodyarts.com or search Ryan PBA on Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr. If you enjoy the show, you can subscribe on iTunes, Apple Podcast, and Google Play. Music by Benny B. Blanco. Show copyright 2017, Precision Body Arts LLC, all rights reserved. Talk. Is that too high? Say something?
The goggles do nothing.